Spontaneous combustion did come out as a response to curation. You could say a conversation or an instigation or a provocation. That was part of the discussion, and that possibly that conversation has not really been had sufficiently.
Chroma living was a very important one for me because I had just got out of school and just kind of going, oh my God, this is fantastic. So that was very, I remember, inspiring for me.
I remember going to some screenings at the Rivoli, and then there was an installation show on Queen Street. But it came out of the Women's Cultural Building.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That was producing a lot of critical kind of work at the time.
There were collectives that were emerging, but there were also people like Tony Brown, Ian Carr-Harris, Liz Magor, and they had really influenced our practices. I met Wendy at OCA. We were in a class that was taught by Ian Carr-Harris. And Ian asked us a question at the end of term, and he said, is there anything that we haven't covered in class that you think needs, looking at? And we both said gender. And so he said, okay, you two can do a class on gender then. And we just clicked and we began to work on projects after that.
A number of us were in a class at OCA with Liz Magor. The power plant had asked Liz to do an installation piece, and she proposed that she would do a piece with the class. And there was a whole discussion around the process and the materiality of it and the ephemerality and all of those kinds of things. But it came out of this kind of collective process.
At OCA in particular, the idea of the artist curator was really emerging. And all of us had a lot of confidence, I think, in putting on exhibitions.
Probably there was a kind of methodology that came out of OCA in terms of the way that we had studied together and some of the sensibilities that developed.
Yael and I worked together at Trinity Square Video, and we'd had some discussion about the lack of spaces for installation.
A lot of us were working, I think, with materials, and we're very conscious of material properties. When we graduated, we were struck by how few opportunities there were for installation artists, particularly any artists who were working with kinetic work or electronics.
We had some fun with the first show.
Well, we made the matches, right?
Yeah, we had books of matches that we sent through the mail, but then we found out it was illegal to send matches through the mail, so we actually sat and lit them all, and then sent them, so they weren't usable
as if
matches.
They had spontaneously combusted already.
We're making very large objects, and we wanted something that could house many, many large pieces.
And we ended up with this amazing space, the Massey Ferguson building, for the first show.
There wasn't that much gentrification along King at that point, as the economy kind of shifted from manufacturing. So to have that show in that location was quite unique. There was a lot to be done before we could even use the space. We spent a lot of time removing carpet. It was a 10,000 square foot space. That's a lot of carpet to take off of flooring. We installed walls. We painted. It was a very raw space. That's what we really loved about it, but it did require a lot of prep work. Wendy and I were really concerned with everybody having what they needed in the space, but it was a real collective. Everybody was part of that.
When the decisions came to where things were situated, it really was like what works best for the piece.
Wendy's work were contact photographs that wrapped around the periphery of the building. So right around the edge of the building, and it was at eye height. Considering all the technology that was involved in these works, I think we had very few glitches. Even during the course of the show, everything was pretty robust. Things ran really well, and it was the same at the opening.
Also last night, spontaneous combustion opened at the old Massey Ferguson building at 954 King Street West. It's an exhibit of mixed
I think people
media
were surprised. We were
installations by 15
relatively young artists to put on such a massive exhibition in such a huge space.
The second time we rented this huge corporate suite right at Queen and Yonge. And it was kind of labyrinthian space. It had hallways and rooms, and people did work very site-specifically there, and also, again, very large scale.
There was a very different approach to work in the second show as well. It wasn't quite so focused on installation. Michael Buchanan and I said we'd never make anything that didn't go into a box again after that first exhibition at Massey Ferguson, because we had sort of had it with the demands of installation art. was facilitated more by the broader collective. People's practices really changed by that time too, but people were becoming more professionalized. The work had less of a raw feel, it was more finished.
Curators, the institutions, are highly invested in a system that actually the collectives were somewhat critical of as well. So it wasn't just that we didn't have space and we needed space. We were also responding to the way that choices were being made and the values that were being put forward by curators and institutions. And that's still an issue. We began to think about an international context, and so we took the show to London.
We couldn't all go over to set up the show ahead of time. And so the group gave the smaller group permission to basically decide where the work would go. I just remember it being an incredibly fun process because it was a show we'd already done, so we already knew the work. Maturity of the group at that point, where we're working collectively but also trusting each other to do these certain jobs. The Royal College of Art ended up assigning our show as part of the curriculum for their master's program because it was such an anomaly to them. So we had all these students coming through asking us questions about it. And it was a pretty great high to end it with the London show.
People went their separate ways. People had families, they moved into graduate studies at different institutions. Lives have overtaken them.
There was a show at some point at YYZ. They didn't call it Best of Collectives, but they had gone around to collectives and picked individual artists and had a show there. And then a number of years later, the Power Plant did one. That actually caused a lot of tension and anxiety, and both within collectives I knew and individuals, and then the relationship between artists and those institutions, because the museums, the collectors, the curators, the commercial galleries are really all part of a particular system that is about the individual artist. It's a shame that they weren't able to stand up and recognize this particular thing that happened in Toronto, and it was very particular, and embrace it.
Would the individuals have produced those same pieces on their own had they not been in the collective? Maybe, maybe not, but they were enhanced by the collective process.
There's a thing that happens when you sing in a choir where the resonance between the bodies creates a kind of endorphin rush in the members of the choir. It's why it's good to sing together. And it's good to make art together for the same reason.
Thank you.